For decades, China grew by producing for the rest of the world. From toys to electronics, billions of products labeled "Made in China" reached every country on the map. Cheap labor, massive investments, and unrestrained exports turned this country into a key link in the global economy. But today, something is changing. Quietly, without grand slogans or official revolutions, China is reshaping its economic model. It no longer wants to be solely the world's factory. It wants to become its consumer. More and more depends not on how much China produces, but on how much it buys. At the heart of the new strategy is domestic consumption and a growing middle class. Hundreds of millions of people are starting to spend more on electronics, transportation, services, education, travel. Once, China made phones for the world. Now, the Chinese are buying them themselves, in record quantities. Will the country that for decades drove global trade now change its rules? In this video, we'll show why Beijing is changing course, what's driving this transformation, and how it might affect the global economy and your life. For years, the Chinese economy was based on one principle: produce more than you consume. Goods were meant for export to Europe, the United States, Africa. Foreign demand was the engine of growth. Factories in Shenzhen, Shanghai, or Dongguan produced clothing, electronics, components for global brands. The Chinese worked, the rest of the world bought. But today, Beijing is betting on something entirely different. China wants its growth to be driven by its own market. Domestic consumption, purchases made by the Chinese themselves, is to become the new pillar of development. This isn't a cosmetic adjustment. It's a fundamental change. It's estimated that the Chinese middle class already numbers about 400 million people. That's more than the entire population of the United States. These people are starting to buy, not out of necessity, but by choice. New smartphones, electric cars, luxury cosmetics, airline tickets, healthcare services, and entertainment. The government is supporting this trend. It lowers taxes, subsidizes electronics purchases, develops service infrastructure. China wants its citizens to buy more, from cars to vacations. Will a society that for years mastered saving now start spending like Americans? This question will decide not only the future of China. The answer will affect prices, supply chains, and corporate strategies worldwide. It's no coincidence that China is changing its model now. It's a necessity driven by the economic environment, geopolitics, and its own internal limitations. First, exports are no longer certain. In recent years, the West has increasingly distanced itself from China. The trade war with the United States, technological sanctions, restrictions on chip exports, and the relocation of factories to Vietnam, India, or Mexico, all of this forms a process that economists call decoupling. China can no longer count on seamless access to Western markets. It must seek stability elsewhere, and the only real source is its own society. Second, the country is changing. Wages are rising, the average worker earns significantly more today than a decade ago, production at low cost is no longer as profitable, China is no longer the world's cheapest factory, and since people earn more, they can also spend more. Third, the middle class. Over the past decade, per capita income has nearly tripled. Millions of people for the first time have real savings, creditworthiness, and a desire to improve their quality of life. And finally, resilience. The world is unstable. Financial crises, conflicts, pandemics all show that dependence on exports is a risk. Domestic consumption offers greater control, less dependence on the whims of the global market. Can China now rely on its own citizens when the world turns away from its goods? This is the most important question of China's decade and the foundation of Beijing's strategy. The shift to consumption doesn't happen on its own. China is actively creating conditions to encourage its citizens to spend more. This isn't just a change in strategy, it's a restructuring of the entire system. The most important element is services. For decades, development meant building roads, factories, and housing. Today, it means developing e-commerce, tourism, education, transportation, and entertainment. Platforms like Alibaba, JD.com, or Meituan handle billions of orders annually. Shopping, food, healthcare, and travel all happen through a phone. The second pillar is technology. Chinese apps from WeChat to Alipay connect daily life with the market. Payments, shopping, bookings, investments, all integrated into one digital space. Add to that local brands that not only compete with global giants, but are gaining an edge. Huawei, Xiaomi, BYD, these are now symbols of the middle class. At the same time, urbanization is growing. New cities, shopping malls, and recreational zones are emerging. The government is investing in social infrastructure because it knows consumers need places and things to spend on. The state isn't waiting for the market to act on its own. It works systematically, offering subsidies for electric cars, tax breaks, and purchasing programs, all to boost citizens' purchasing power and change their habits. Will China build a domestic market bigger than America? If it succeeds, the world will no longer just look at what China produces. It will start to matter what it consumes. The Chinese plan sounds logical. A country that exported for decades is starting to live off its own consumption. But this change isn't simple, because to spend, you need not only money, you need confidence. The first problem is inequality. In Beijing or Shanghai, the average resident buys expensive watches, electric cars, and overseas vacations. But a few hundred kilometers away in the provinces, life looks completely different. Incomes can differ tenfold. Consumption isn't growing evenly. The second problem is the culture of saving. The Chinese have spent years learning not to spend. In a country without a strong pension system or public healthcare, savings are a safety shield. Even those who earn well often prefer to save rather than spend. The third problem is debt. Household debt in China already reaches about 60% of GDP. Mortgages, consumer loans, credit cards. All this is creating pressure that many won't withstand. And finally, dependence on technology. Chinese companies are increasingly innovative, but they're still vulnerable to Western sanctions. A single block on access to key components could shake the entire system. Will China manage to change its society's mindset before the economy stalls? The new model has potential, but for now it's more of an ambition than a reality. China's change in model is not just an internal reform. It's a process that's already affecting the global economy and will change it even more. First, a new market. China's middle class numbers hundreds of millions of people. It's the largest consumer group in the world. Companies like Apple, Tesla, or Nike know that without a presence in China, they lose access to the biggest growth field. The Chinese buy more, faster, and more often. And every new need is a new $1 billion. Second, exports are shrinking. China, which once flooded the world with cheap goods, is now exporting less. This means higher prices for electronics, clothing, and devices because alternatives in India or Vietnam are often more expensive and less efficient. Consumers in the West are starting to feel it, and will feel it more. Third, competition. Chinese brands are not just meeting domestic demand, they're going global. BYD sells more electric cars than Tesla. Xiaomi is pushing Samsung out of the budget segment. Huawei, despite sanctions, builds smartphones without Western components. Will Chinese consumers make your phone more expensive? Or perhaps it's China that will produce the new phone you'll use? China's consumption-driven growth means one thing: less dependence on the world. But for the rest of the world, it means growing dependence on China. China no longer wants to be just the place that produces for the rest of the world. It wants to drive the global economy, not through exports, but through its own demand. From the world's factory, it's shifting to the role of the largest consumer market. This is a change that could reshape the balance of power across the planet. But this path isn't easy. Income inequalities, debt, technological limitations, geopolitical tensions, all this could slow or even halt the process. China has the potential to lead global growth, but it must overcome its own barriers. The world stands at a turning point. If China builds a stable consumption model, it will become the new center of demand. And if it fails, the global economy will feel it immediately. Will China become the new leader in consumption? Will it pull the world along or lose its balance? This is a question we'll find the answer to in the coming years. Thank you for watching this episode. If you found it interesting, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your support helps us dive deeper into topics like these. See you in the next video.